Wait, what? Oh yeah. It's that time again, isn't it? Welcome! It's Flycast. That's John. Hi, Steve. We're here to entertain you. Hopefully. Take it away, good sir.
Yo, the dreamiest duo on the Twitch. Aw, shucks. Thanks, Jimmy.
We are a good-looking pair of fellows.
Sure. We'll go with that. Welcome. Thanks, those of you stopping by live or later on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever. Appreciate you. We are Steve and John, a couple of nerdy guys who love playing Dungeons & Dragons and got a decent amount of DM experience, and just decided we were going to go ahead and start a podcast and talk about our experiences, share our wealth of knowledge, I guess. I don't know. But just have a lot of fun, built a little bit of a community. People like to ask questions, so we figured we would kind of provide an opportunity to share our thoughts and answer some. So every week we've got a little bit of a topic that we like to go over. We'll go ahead and dive on into that in just a second here. Last week we did something a little bit different. I think we're going to do that like every five episodes, do one of these ranking videos. So last week we ranked all of our favorite classes, least most favorite. That was a lot of fun. But that took the whole time, which I think is fine. I think people had a lot of fun with it. But because of that, we have some overflow questions that we'll get to this week. So we're going to go ahead and was Barbarian number one? It was, wasn't it? No, it was neither of our number one, not. Jimmy. Come on, man. I bet you can. I bet you can guess Steve's number one at least. Mine was probably a little bit of a surprise.
Easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that did catch me.
Yeah.
Admittedly, that did.
This podcast
fuck you.
Barbarian was actually my number 12, bro. My bottom. But I still love it. I love them all.
What was it, like number 7 or something like that?
Yeah, it was somewhere in the middle for you, I think.
It was up there because like I appreciate what they do and stuff. So
that was a lot of fun. If you haven't checked that out, you should go back and check that out. You can check it out on YouTube or, again, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It's on both of those as well. So thank you, guys. You can always, follow us along in those on those mediums as well. But for today, our topic is a little bit different. We've been doing like these different versus ones and showing kind of different sides of things, but today got a little bit of inspiration, and this topic was all Steve's idea, so I will go ahead and just kind of hand it off to you to go ahead and introduce it and get the conversation started.
Sure. Today we're going to talk about character death and how to handle it, because like I think it's a little easier when we run the games. It's like we kind of expect it in some areas, and some areas we don't. But I've even had some tough times with character death here and there. I think when a character, when a person puts so much into a character, especially when they're just a player, that's all they do. They just want to play. They want to make these really great, like, in-depth backstories and everything. And that's really cool. As a DM, I always appreciate a good backstory, because I can almost guarantee that it's going to come up at some point, at least in my games. I try to use them as story beats and stuff like that. But, occasionally you're going to have that situation where you run into a fight that either it's going very poorly due to like it being, you're just outnumbered, you're overwhelmed, it's too powerful, or maybe you just made a bonehead mistake. I mean, I've done that. Shoot, I had one of my characters get his head lopped off because of that. So I'd say, that's a tough one for some characters. I mean, like, some people just like, I've seen people just pour like novels into their characters. And I'm like, although I appreciate that, it doesn't always come into play. So I'd say, like, with character death, I always try to do this, especially at the beginning of campaigns. I'll use the example that I did for the Curse of Strahd, because these were all fairly new players. I was like, listen, guys, can be a difficult module, especially at least in the early, stages of it. Have a backup in mind, and please don't be offended if I kill you, because this is supposed to be a gritty, like horror like setting that you could die. And I know personally I've gotten gun shy because I have lost a lot of characters in like one campaign. But I think the best way to handle it is, take a minute and breathe and just, get back into the creative flow, because depending on when the character death happened, they can always come back. So
Yeah, I think you touched on something pretty big there, and that's that I think a big part of kind of how to handle a character death is on the DM, kind of setting expectations. Like you said, with like when you're in Strahd, you're like, hey guys, I want you to know at the on the front end, you might die. Like, this is a very real possibility. And I think a lot of times the DM doesn't really set that expectation very well. And it also
right,
depends on what kind of game you're playing, right? Like, if you're playing,
right,
like, for instance, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, if you die in that game, I don't know what the hell you did wrong. Like, maybe you went up to the gold dragon at the end and poked it with a stick until it just got mad and ate you. That's the only way that I can think of to die in that game. Like, it's not.
right,
There's a lot of other things about it that are a lot of fun, but like combat difficulty level isn't one of them. You can still have a lot of fun with the combat in the game. I'm not saying anything like that, but it's just not one of those games where you really expect the character to die. Curse of
right,
Strahd, Tomb of Annihilation, and then kind of whatever like homebrew thing you're doing. Like
right.
those are areas where it's like going in, you really need to set that expectation because, like, I mean, Tomb of Annihilation is one because I'm getting prepped for that and just kind of reading through it, and it's like, not only is there like this whole death curse thing going on, hey, that's another sub right there,
Oh,
16 months in a row from Billy. Woo! Billy knocking on the door of the Kenku. Or not, sorry, not from Billy, talking about Billy. That was Mutt. Yes, exactly. Billy knocking on the door of the Kenku. That'll get someone killed. That's fair.
right,
That's one way to die in Dragon Heist, I guess. But yeah, like, Death Curse aside, which makes it kind of impossible to come back once you die, Tomb of Annihilation is
right,
filled with very, very dangerous places. You can definitely die very easily. Like the main boss at the end is like a CR-23 Lich. Like there's a lot of deadly stuff in that, and then obviously Curse of Strahd. Once you get higher level, it's maybe not as tough, but especially low level, like you're supposed to be being ambushed by creatures that can easily kill you.
right.
You're supposed to encounter Strahd, who could easily kill you if you wanted to. So there's definitely a possibility for a character to die, and if the DM doesn't set that expectation on the front end, and then you walk into a temple and get killed by yuan ti, or you get mauled by a bunch of wolves or something and you're dead now, and there's like in Strahd there's only one place really to get resurrected either, so it
Right.
if that expectation isn't set, that can really hit a character, like a kid hit a player really hard.
I think it's tough because I know like how like the first time it happened with me, it was kind of tough because I liked that character, but I realized
was
that
this
was on me.
was this Veil of Shadows?
I think that no, well, no, you're right. That one hit me because I was like, oh god, I barely had. I did come up with a pretty detailed backstory, and when it happened, it was just like, and again, this isn't like he was just trying to just brutalize us, but I was in a bad situation. It was like I was in like a cloud where nobody could have seen me go down, and I failed my death saves. And then there was another time when I was like, you know what? It was a story moment, and I had to make a decision. Well, what would the character do? The character's like, fuck off. I'm not going to do that. And he died. But, and I was okay with that because, like, as much as I enjoyed the character, I think one of the things I try to remind players is sometimes, even in death, you can tell a cool story because that
Mm-hmm.
set up for that arc what like Grady's character did. He had my sword, he got the final blow, was able to tell this cool story about beheading my, Vale's old enemy. It was really cool. That's in it. Sometimes you can just have like cool story in death.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I've also like, when I have killed people, I genuinely feel bad about it.
Right.
But I won't hesitate. I will do it.
Yeah.
It sucks, but I will do it.
Yeah, I think it's good to kind of think of death as just kind of another part of the story, and
Right.
depending on like where you are, also it's, I mean, you can certainly come back, or like you can obviously make another character or whatever. It can be kind of fun to make like a resurrection idea, like a kind of a quest line and whatnot for a party. Like I think we've done that a little bit before. Yeah, I think like when a character dies, uh, you're gonna feel it, right? And I think that's okay. I think if anyone gives you the advice of, oh, it's just a game, get over it and move on, like they're just being an asshole. Like it's going to hurt, and let it hurt for a minute. It's supposed to. If it doesn't, then you weren't attached to the character and you should have made a different one anyway. But let it hurt for a little bit, and then start thinking of a new idea or something along those lines. Like you're let it sting. That's fine, and then now you get to realize, hey, wait a second, now I get to make a whole new character. Like I think like if you DM, you're making characters all the time, right? But if you're a player and you're playing in like one game, and this game's been going on for a year and a half, you've made one character in a year and a half, and that's cool, and you can get really attached to that character, but the process of creating a new one is really, really fun too. And being able to open up all these possibilities and being like, oh man, I've been playing this paladin for a year and a half. I wonder what bard is like. I wonder what monk is like. Oh my goodness, they can do all these cool things. I never even thought of that. Or like, when I made this character, I didn't really know what the party makeup was going to be, and turns out I'm a paladin who's pretty tanky, but we already have this barbarian also, and nobody decided that they wanted to be a stealthy character, so I'm going to make a ranger or a rogue or maybe even a bard or something along those lines. And that could be a lot of fun. I've been playing barbarian for 2 years. I wonder what barbarian is like. Yeah, something tells me if Jimmy were to lose a character, he would roll up another barbarian. But I think that's a great way to view a character death is like, don't just brush past it and move on and be like, whatever. Like, go ahead and let it hurt for a minute, but just give yourself, a few minutes to kind of grieve, and then start thinking of your next character, because that can be a lot of fun also.
Another thing too is like when Vale died, I had to go through a process of creation. Like I made Forge, and I wasn't having fun with Forge because Forge, like we tried to do the new Forge cleric thing, and it just wasn't that great. And but then I retired that, and I made a wizard, and that's when I made Vac. And Vac has been a staple of mine and your gameplay for years now. And that was between him and Dash. Those are my two favorite characters I've played. So like you can use the death for that creative moment, and you can create something better. Something that's eccentric and fun.
And kind of along those lines too, I'd say like this is kind of a tangent, but if you're not feeling a character, just talk to your DM about it, and you guys can come up with something else. If you're playing with a good DM, they will certainly allow you to make someone else, like retire that one character at least for the time being and do something else. If you're heading like head first into danger to try and get a character killed because you don't like them, like you're putting your party at risk. That's just being a douchebag. Just talk to your DM. And like we've actually both experienced that quite a bit, right? Like Forge, he just wasn't feeling it, so he just kind of retired that character, and he came back into play kind of later in that adventure in a couple of my other games here and there too, as just kind of like an NPC who exists on the side and kind of helps things out because it's a in-universe character now. I had a similar situation with Rupert in Steve's last campaign that just ended. I really liked that character. I had a lot of fun with him, but he was an evil character who, like, my original plan for him was that, like, being with the party, he was going to soften up a little bit and start to care about the party. And he did care about the party to an extent, but was also very selfish. But then he also started making like contracts with devils and stuff, and started going down a very, very irredeemable path in a party with a paladin and a cleric who honestly should just be killing him. So I just kind of came to the decision. I'm like, this character I'm having a lot of fun with, but really doesn't fit this party. So I need to let him go and do his own thing. And then I rolled up Xander. But then, like, Rupert was able to come back in the end and be kind of like a character piece and whatnot. So if you're not feeling a character or you don't think they vibe with the party very well, you can always, like, let that character retire, at least for the time being, and grab something else as well, rather than, you know, maybe purposefully trying to get them killed. That doesn't do anybody
being really reckless.
Yeah, that's another thing too. I was actually talking about this a little bit with Megan earlier, and she was saying how character death obviously impacts the player, but it impacts the whole the party as a whole, really, right? You know, one character dies, now the entire party has to kind of deal with that. Did you die in the middle of battle? What's the party gonna do? Do they continue to try and fight this? Do they try and run away? If they try and run away, do they try and like drag your corpse with them? Like what? You know, so there's a lot to think about there. After the battle or whatever. What do they do? Do they try and get you resurrected? Do they just give you a nice burial? So I think there's a lot to be considered on that end as well with the how does it affect the party? And if you're playing a character uber recklessly and more or less trying to get them killed, do realize that there's an entire party to think about, not just you and your character.
I agree. I think that's a tough one. Like I've seen some of my players handle it like champs, where and actually made me feel better about myself, because I'm like, I've had times where I've handled it rather poorly. I like that character. I didn't want it to get kicked out or die or whatever, you know, but you know, at the same time, it's just like it happens. And I've been guilty of like, fuck, you know, and then walking away for a minute, because like, even though it was meaningless, one of my characters, hello Jess,
hey, Jess.
One of my characters died, and it makes no difference because he's always alive, but it still hurt. I'm like, that's my boy. But
and I think that's fine. Again, like I think advice of, oh, just shut up and move on is stupid. You should be able to have that moment to be like, man, that really sucks. And if you don't have that moment, then you probably just didn't care enough about the character and should have made a different one.
You weren't invested enough. But then again, I mean, sometimes that it can be advantageous too. Like I'll use an example of Cameron. Cameron, newer player in my game on a Sunday, and like unfortunately for them, they ran into the vampire fight at like 4th level in Strahd. You know, we're in the cat or the coffin maker shop. They didn't have any of the items. It's nothing. So, I mean, that fight was just against him from the get-go. Even though there was like 6 or 7 players, when you're level 4 and these vampires, if you play them right, can grapple you, can bite you, can drain your max HP, and like as cool as the moment that Cameron was trying to portray, he spreads these radiant wings from his sorcerer, goes in the middle of them, tells this really cool story of trying to help his team. Unfortunately, he just gets surrounded. He just gets gnawed on, and I'm like, Cameron, what are your final words? And it was cool. He's like, run! And that was the key for the party to just retreat. It like they knew right then, like you could tell by their language and their body, motions, that they're like, if we don't leave, we're fucked. So he used that opportunity with that death to tell a very good story, like buying his teammates time.
Well, yeah, I mean, that goes back to kind of what you were talking about earlier about, character death being part of the story and everything, which, I think that's really good. And yeah, I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily a point of like not caring about the character dying, but yeah, that's another good way to deal with it. Is like, I know this is coming, so here's what I do, trying to help
Right.
out the party and whatnot, which I think is smart. I think you and I have both had situations kind of like that before too, right? Like I think when you killed Xander, and he's just like, it's okay, and then instantly came right back up, but then
Literally. Yeah.
your play with Dash when you tried to get the party to kind of flee from these minotaurs that had surrounded
Right.
them. So he
That
didn't die
was
there,
I
but
was going to die. I was
yeah,
going to.
yeah, but
I
you didn't.
was like,
Haha.
yeah.
Hey,
I
Popcorn, how's
would.
it going?
That was not me trying to get the character killed.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was
yeah.
me. That was me knowing that at the time I was the most experienced player at the table, and I wanted them to get out.
Right.
So I was
Uh,
like, I'm willing to make that sacrifice.
yeah. But yeah, I think
Sketch
that's
Wilder's immortal.
I think that's
Maybe.
kind of the advice, right? Like, you go ahead and let it sting, but always kind of be looking forward to what opportunities does this open up for me, right?
Right.
It opens up the opportunity for you to make a new character, and depending on where
Right.
you are in the game and kind of what story you've been telling, it gives you the opportunity to maybe play a new character for just a little bit of time while the party gets your character resurrected, or maybe just kind of move in an entirely new direction. So I think that's the great way to look at it, is kind of realize that it's an opportunity for kind of a new beginning, as opposed to like, oh, everything sucks. So that's the advice I would
Right.
have. Um, with that, though, we are not quite halfway through, but I kind of figured this would be the like quick section, because we do have backup questions from last week. So we've got some questions in our Discord. If you guys have any more questions for us, you can drop them in our Discord. Link should be in the Twitch kind of info or whatever below, or of course you can just drop them live in chat here as well. We'll try and get to them. We're going to run a quick break, and then we've got a couple of quick questions about today's topic, and then we will answer questions about classes and stuff from last week as well. So we will be back in about 3 minutes or so.
Question time. It's always good to see a new DM.
Yeah, before we jump into questions, hey, congratulations to Popcorn. Yay for being the new DM. Always like to encourage that. I love to see people getting into DMing. I think a lot of people get scared off by it because I think it's really, really complicated, really, really tough. And yeah, sure, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to it, I guess. But honestly, just about anyone can do it. I feel like, anyway. Whatever you don't know, you can just kind of make a ruling and move on, and kind of learn as you go. I think that's awesome. So congratulations, and yay. With that, let's go ahead and grab some questions. So our theme this week was talking about character death and kind of how to deal with it. We've got a couple of quick questions that deal with that, and then we'll go ahead and jump into questions that we had from last week about just kind of classes, our favorite classes, ideas we have on that. So let's go ahead and take a look-see here. Kill that music here. All right. So first, we've got a couple of questions from Mutt here regarding, or I guess a question from Mutt here regarding character death. He says, oftentimes there's an attitude that after seeing characters die and rolling up a new character becomes trivial, though it might still be significant to the player. It appears that overall it can lead to character death not being a big deal. What are your thoughts on that? And if you do agree, what are some methods that you can use to put some weight behind the death? First of all, I'll just say I feel like in 5e in general, character death is very much not a big deal. In like levels 1 through 5 or so, maybe it is. But even then, I feel like most of the time you'll be able to find someone who's capable of kind of getting you a resurrection or something like that, unless something crazy happened to where there's no body left. Um, but pretty much after that, like level 5, I think level 5 you get access to third level spells, and I think Revivify is a third level spell, I'm pretty sure. So if you have a cleric or someone else capable of casting that spell in your party, unless you're getting disintegrated or like something along those lines to where the body doesn't exist anymore, uh, or that character doesn't have their spell slot available anymore, you're not going to die. So that makes it a lot more difficult to die, and that's only at level 5, man. Like before long you've got, Raise Dead, you've got Resurrection, True Resurrection. Depending on what campaign you're playing in, you're just swimming in gold and have no idea what to do with it. So if someone dies, oh great, I have something to do with my gold now, I'll go buy a Resurrection.
Right.
Plus, in order to get to that point of death, generally speaking, again, unless there's like a disintegrate or power word kill or finger of death or something, or you get hit with a fuck ton of damage, generally speaking, you need to go down, and then 3 rounds have to go by, during which your entire party is like, I don't really care about that guy, so I'm not going to try and get him up. Obviously it happens, but it's pretty rare, and then when it does happen, most of the time you can undo it fairly easily. So yeah, I do feel like death is not that big a deal in 5e. One of the ways that I overcome that is by having kind of custom death mechanics. I require a skill check in order to actually resurrect someone with anything other than like Revivify. But as far as kind of the true nature of the question of kind of how do you put more weight behind just kind of the process of death and then rolling up another character, I don't know. That's a good question. I will leave that to Steve. Let's see if you have a better answer to that than I do.
I think when it comes to running the game, and I think this is something that you allowed me to do when Sparky's character bit it, is I took it into as a role play moment. I went off the hinge because that was my best buddy, and we had some story involved with that. A lot of times, I think he put that weight back on the players. How the players respond to it, and then because if the person running the character was not real well liked, I mean, you could have the players just move on.
Right.
Like, I mean, I hate to throw my boy Adrian under the bus, but when he got his sorcerer killed, the players were okay with it because he kept throwing fireballs on them. And like, you get like, you play your character a certain way. I'll just throw it out there. If you play your character with either chaotic intent or evil intent, and you die, and the other characters, not necessarily the players, but the characters want nothing to do with that character, you kind of fucked yourself, okay? But if
for instance, if Rupert would have died in your game, I don't think any of those characters would have dropped a dime to resurrect him.
No, I don't think they would have either.
Yeah.
But Xander, the mountains of gold would have been were thrown at him. I mean, it's like, no, you're not getting rid of that character. No, everybody loves that character. So I think as DM, I think it really comes to the putting that weight back on the players and how they handle the death. And honestly, when Brent killed himself in the Strahd campaign, it actually shocked the new players to play a little bit more seriously. To go, oh, that character is now gone.
You realize that a death can happen. Yeah, that's fair.
And I think that's the best way to do it. I mean, if it's a one shot, I don't really care. Right. I think the weight of death is a storytelling tool, and like you've done for us, you can turn it into a quest, especially at low level. At higher level, it can be a minor inconvenience. Let's be honest. But
if that,
then again, like I think the thing, like with the upcoming Eberron campaign, the more and more I read about it, the more and more I'm like, magic is very prevalent, but it is prevalent in the fact that it's day to day. It's not like this ooh, raise me from the dead kind of magic.
Yeah,
So I
the big
think in
stuff is
that
still rare.
campaign,
Yeah.
I think in that kind of campaign, you wouldn't necessarily be able to find somebody to do it, but you could go to the Mornland and find a dungeon with a holy powerful artifact
Yeah.
and turn that into a dungeon crawl for that character. See, there's always a spin. There's always something we can do to try to be like, to bring that character back. And honestly, just if you really are having a hard time with the character death, talk to your DM about it. I mean, we're pretty open to our players. If we truly have an issue, the DM can be like, "We'll find a way to bring him back." There's a way. It might take some time. Why don't you roll up another character and see how it goes? And then if you want to bring this such and such character back, we can retire this other one, making him NPC.
Right.
I think that's my best answer for that.
Yeah, I think like the idea of kind of giving them a quest behind it and whatnot makes good for like a story to kind of come out of that death. But yeah, I do think like putting weight behind the death, the best way to do that is really putting that back on the player, like you said. Like so in game, who knows that character best? The rest of the characters who are partying with them, right, or adventuring with them. So who's going to be most affected by that character dying? It's the other characters that are adventuring with them. So yeah, Steve, if you and I are playing together and my character dies, well, how do you react to that? Like, that's on you, not on Joe, who's running the game. Now, that said, I guess a way for the DM to kind of bring more weight to that is have NPCs who also care about the player, right? So, like, for instance, in the Wine Women Adventure Tour game, Grady's character has a brother who he's very close with, who the party has all met. So, if Grady's character were to die, it would make a lot of sense when that news reaches him for that to then be on me. Like, how do I have that NPC react? That's a way that I think the DM can bring that in. But yeah, I agree. I think that's mostly going to be on the players to give it that weight and let it like really mean something. Okay. That was our period. Moving on, now we're going to go ahead and jump into our questions that we had kind of rolled over from last week about classes and stuff, so this would be some good old-fashioned fun. First question I have right here from Adrian. Besides Bard, what is a good class for role-playing? First of all, I'm going to say all classes are good classes for role-playing. That said,
I was thinking that same thing.
That said, Steve, what do you think?
I was literally thinking the same thing. Gosh, man, they're like, maybe we should go into more detail with it. Maybe like what could like, God, man, I feel like I literally just want to give it a blanket statement and be like everything. It just depends on what you're bringing to the table. But if you're wanting something in particular, if you're wanting something spicy, I'd say Warlock, because there's always, if you're looking for some edge, or and also Oathbreaker Paladin, if you're wanting some edginess.
Yeah, I'd say
if you're wanting to tell a happy story, you could go Cleric or something like that.
I'd say it depends on a lot on how creative you want to be and how much you want to put into it, right? Like if you want a blank slate to play whatever character you want to come up with, fighter. But
even then, you could do a cool story with it, though, because you can be
well, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Soldier. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, if you want to be creative and make up something, just kind of like whatever you want without any like input from the book or whatever, I guess. Fighter is what I would say, because you can do literally anything with it. If you want to not do all the heavy lifting yourself and want there to be some lore behind your role play, that kind of helps you out and gets you there. Warlock. I think Monk is pretty good. I think Cleric or Paladin can be, because all of those classes have built into them some sort of motivation or a little bit of backstory. Ranger's another one. So I would say all those, but yeah, honestly, all classes are great for roleplay, and it really just kind of depends on how much you want to bring to the table versus read.
I used my ranger as like a village hunter who came back and everything was slaughtered, and I told a very dark, gritty background of how he wanted revenge, and he basically lived his life for that. That's why he joined this group of outlaws to get enough money to hire mercenaries, and eventually he's just gonna be like, fuck you guys, and just leave the party. But then it turned into character growth moments from there. So there's so much you can do. It just really depends on the kind of backstory and the story that you're wanting to tell. I mean, I've seen Jimmy tell good stories with barbarians with a blank sheet on his literally his
just nothing filled in. Yeah, exactly.
But he actually
hit
told
points,
me
hit points, and damage die. That's about all he's got on the sheet. Yeah.
Yeah. But like he told me last night, he's like, there was no story for Arillo other that one day he woke up and he was the king of the turtle people. That's his background, because he has no idea how he got there.
Yeah.
And that was like a sentence. And I'm like, okay. And then you see how the character built his story along the way. So I'd say the best way to answer that is, what are you bringing to the table with the character that you've made?
Right.
How are you going to grow?
Yep,
that's the best answer.
Question from Koa. Is there a class that gets a bad rep for being either too strong or too useless?
Druid.
For being too strong?
Too strong,
yeah. I can see that. I don't think it gets a bad rep for that, but level 20 at level 20 they are too strong. That is definitely true. When you can not polymorph, when you can wild shape into an earth elemental and just give yourself like 150 hit points every turn, that's broke. Outside of that, I don't think anything being too strong. Useless, I would say. Rules as written, using nothing but the player's handbook, people think that the ranger is useless, but that's because they're looking at the beastmaster and not the hunter. The hunter is still good. The beastmaster is useless, which really sucks because it's cool flavor. It's a cool idea, but it is absolute trash. So is the 4 elements monk. Yeah.
Yep.
It just sucks. So I would say those are the ones that come to mind. That said, like, they're not... Saying they're useless is not quite true. I think both of those subclasses... Yeah, I think both of those subclasses are decidedly less powerful than kind of the rest of the party will be, but you can still have a lot of fun with those subclasses, and the classes as a whole are definitely not useless. It's just those subclasses aren't great. A rogue has a couple of crappy subclasses. Inquisitive and Mastermind have some really cool ideas. They're just not great. Live question from Mutt. What are your feelings on barbarian subclasses? Depends on the subclass. I think there's a lot of really cool ones. I think Berserker is a little lame, but it's not like useless or anything. I think Bear Totem is obnoxious. It's very powerful, but it's boring. I think the ones in Xanathars are fantastic. And I also like the ones... I don't know about the wild magic one, but the beast one in Tasha's.
We were talking about this actually the other day about barbarians. It's like, if you're trying to make a strength-based character and you're wanting to go frenzied, you can still tank a little bit with frenzy, but just keep in mind, if you run into a wizard, I mean, you're kind of fucked, because like, unless you find a magic item to help, and let's be honest, I've already told some of my players I'm committing to myself to give you no magic items till at least level 5. So,
yeah, I've tried to do that too.
And that's just to like give a more genuine experience at the beginning of the game. Like, you guys are all powerful people as is, but you know.
Here's one I wanted to get to from Heimdall's site. What is the best class in your opinion to play as an archer?
Ranger fighter.
Ranger/fighter, like a multi-class.
3 fighter, rest ranger.
Interesting.
You go arcane, and
my answer was going to be Street Fighter. Which I know is not the assumed answer. The assumed answer is Ranger, maybe Rogue. But I think Street Fighter. You get, you get more attacks because you'll get up to 4 plus your action surges. And then even before Arcane Archer came out, it still is way better than you think it is. And then with Arcane Archer, there's so many cool things that you can do too, like exploding arrows and all sorts. You played it, so you know.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
That's a quick answer. I don't have much more to say about it other than it's way better than you think it is. I don't think it's Ranger. I don't think it's Rogue. I think it's Street Fighter. But Ranger Fighter also makes a lot of sense too because Rangers do a lot of damage.
Well, and you also, I think for me, you get the I like the support. So if I'm not needed to do damage, I can help the team with spells. I can help them with other things.
My only argument there then is that you're not playing an archer. You're playing a support character who's also an archer then, or an archer who's also a support character. It's just not a pure archer. Which is, again, it's to each your own. But that's why I say what I say. Question from Tracy that I definitely had to get to. This is a question solely for Steve. God. What did sorcerers ever do to you to deserve so much of your wrath?
Adrian. Sorry, buddy. I love you, but yeah.
I think the overall question here is, Steve, why exactly do you hate sorcerers so much?
They're growing on me. After playing one, they're growing on me. I'm not the type of person that generally likes to completely be a blaster. If I'm playing a mage, even if I'm playing evocation, like I love getting my evocation mage to like level 10, but I still do a lot of support spells too, guys. Like the evocation for me is when I get to add my intelligence modifier to my cantrips, my damage spells, anything that's evocation based. But I can still cast haste on you. I can still cast slow on you, and I like the flavor of I have to grow and learn instead of just being born with it. It just annoys me to like, you're born with this. You're like literally you're Scott Summers from the X-Men. You can just cast these energy rays from your eyes, kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. I think, and I would totally agree that I think a wizard is a better control character as opposed to a sorcerer who they can do kind of some supporty, control-y stuff, but they're definitely best when they're just throwing damage out like crazy. And that's going to bring us to our next question from Mutt. What are the strengths and weaknesses of each caster class? Which is a loaded question. So let's define caster classes. We've got Bard, Cleric, Druid,
full caster,
and then the other three would be Sorcerer, Warlock, Wizard. I think. Yeah. So, what do you think?
Well, I can wax poetic about that. I think Bard's strength is clearly the versatility. They can heal you. They can debuff. They can inspire you.
I'd agree. I think they're... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. You're fine. Go ahead. What was your point?
I think they're kind of the best at like the buffs and debuffs while also like being crazy versatile, right? You can have a Valor Bard who's actually a really good martial character too. Yeah.
Yeah, you can take a hit. You're not the ideal tank, let's be honest. But you can take a hit. You can attack twice that's why like everybody likes the Lord Bards. I get it. You get more magical secrets. I like the Valor Bard because I feel like I'm more useful to my team. I can take more hits. If somebody gets in my grill, I'm wearing a breastplate and a shield. I've got a decent AC, and I can actually, support my team in that way too. I can draw some of the threat off, say, my paladin, who's getting fucking wrecked. I can draw some heat off of my caster, something along those lines. And if I need to get out, guess what I'm doing? Poof. I'm out. Yeah. 500 feet away. So
that's Bard. Cleric?
Cleric, I think, is only limited by your imagination. And the only thing I don't like about Cleric is because it is a full caster class, you don't get a second attack because like.
Well, it does depend on the cleric. It does depend on the cleric. A war cleric can attack as a bonus action like 5 times rest.
I did not know that.
Yeah. I don't remember. I don't remember the exact mechanic. It's probably tied into your wisdom modifier, and I can't remember if it's short or long rest that you get them back. But they can sometimes attack as a bonus action.
Then I honestly don't feel like cleric has a downside to it because like you can res, you can heal. Like I loved playing my heal bot. I healed the shit out of people. You can play it pure damage. You know, you can throw guiding bolts, pillars of fire, and divine radiant energy all day long.
Yeah, I think they're pretty much the best support class, but they're kind of like Bard to where they're really versatile depending on what you're doing, right? Like a war cleric can be a really good tank, honestly. Even with just a D8 hit dice, they could still be a really good tank.
I'd say
or you can do a life cleric who can heal people at will. It's fantastic. Druid.
I mean, what's the downside to it? I mean, like Nameless didn't really have a downside.
I'd say they're not really good at damage very much, but they're good for control. They're good supporty, and they like the summons and whatnot that they can get are really cool.
Call Lightning though is such a good spell.
It is, but that's still not a huge damage spell. It's a little bit of AoE, and you get some stuff going on, but it's not like you're casting Fireball, you know?
Yeah, that would be the only downside to me, though, because like even if you're playing Circle of the Moon, you can cast a freaking Call Lightning spell, then use your bonus action to change into something extremely tanky, and then you just gotta hope that while you're in that form, you don't get cracked too hard where you fail your con save.
Yeah. So I think no, you don't drop out of con when you're wild shaped.
No, the spell.
Oh, gotcha. To hold the spell.
Concentration spell.
Ignore me.
Because you can't cast it again when you're in the shape.
I think we kind of talked about sorcerer and wizard already. Basically, I think a wizard is a better I think they're the best controller in the game, right? They can kind of control the battlefield, and a sorcerer just they're the glass cannon. They're the damage dealer, right? They're the one throwing a fireball out and then shooting a ray of frost or something like that, all on the same turn. That damage output is unmatched. They get more access
to more spells too.
They have
way more, like wizards get way more access.
Wizards have way more spells that they get access to, which kind of gives them that edge on the control. And sorcerers get more cantrips, which kind of gives them more access to, to do those like quicken spells or twin spells or whatever, to where they're kind of hitting more stuff with more damage all the time. And then the last one then is Warlock, which I think the drawbacks are pretty obvious. Less spell slots.
Slots. Yeah.
But it is really cool getting your spells back at a short rest. And it is really cool
a lot of flavor to the class.
Yeah, there's a ton of flavor, and the Warlock invocations I think are super cool too, right? You can really and the fact that there's so many of them can really let you kind of mold your character a little bit different, than other warlocks potentially. So,
and as long as you don't mind being a cantrip machine, I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, you use your spells in a Hail Mary moment, and you're a cantrip machine. You're a Eldritch Blast guy or gal.
Right. Question from Grim or Adrian. He's got this kind of a multi-part question. So, first question: what's the best support class?
Bard.
I would probably say either Bard or Cleric. It kind of depends on kind of how you're playing it, right? If you're playing a Valor Bard, they're not going to be as supporty. If you're playing a War Cleric, also not going to be as supporty. But like a Lore Bard or Glamour Bard or anything like that, yeah, they're crazy good at it. A Life Cleric or I'm forgetting my other domains. I don't know.
There's so many of them.
Yeah, I don't know. Anything other than war, really, are going to be really good at support. Also, a knowledge cleric is really cool, actually.
Right.
So yeah, I would say one of those two classes. Uh, this this is how you recognize someone who got into D&D after being an MMO player. Best raw DPS. Because there's no such thing as DPS in D&D, just damage. Yeah, Ranger's a good one.
Fighter.
Yeah.
Some kind of paladin. I mean, I've seen barbarians do a shit ton too. I mean, it's just really
straight up damage. I would probably say it's between Ranger and Paladin, probably, because Paladin smites are so powerful, but the Ranger does a good amount of damage every turn. Sorcerer is great for it, but they are more of like I see them more of like an AoE damage than like, yeah.
Same with wizards. It's a big boom. It's not always consistent.
Yeah, and then tankiest. I think everyone knows Barbarian.
Totem.
Yeah, bear totem barbarian. Like they're so freaking hard to bring down, man.
Well, that one that Jordan made, what was that? That was a good one too, though. Shit, what was that? The
Ancestral Guardian or whatever it's called.
Ancestral, but it took a minute to get to that point, though.
Yeah,
but bear, yeah.
Yeah, I think hands down Barbarian. I know, like it's fun to not always have the Barbarian be the tank. A cleric can do it well. A paladin can do it well. A fighter can do that well. Even a monk kind of can because high dex. Hey, that's a sub from Heimdall Sight, and he says Anyway, so like they can all kind of do it well, but no one does it as well as a Barbarian. That is what they are best at, is tanking. And the last part of his question is, what's your favorite classes to cross? I think like multi-classing.
I've only done it once, because sometimes I just get into a spot where I'm like, well, I could do this, but I could do that. But like, I'm only from experience has been Fighter Ranger, so. There's other things I think that might have some, like I think one of the favorite things I've seen like my players do is I've seen 3 levels of Barbarian and the rest like Samurai. Billy did that, and it was really so good. Not only did he get his, he could do a lot of damage because of the his action surge, but then he could tank too. Like he was like it was like a point where I was like, I'm not killing this guy. It's just I can't. I mean, less short of just a miracle. Yeah, Sword Pally was good too.
Yeah, I was gonna say that one worked really well for me. Once I think it's all about picking your spot to multi-class, right? For me, I was playing a Paladin, and level 12, I got an ability score increase, and then for a Paladin, between levels 12 and 18, there's basically nothing. You get spell slots slowly, and that's about it. So. If you stick with it, like once you hit, I think it's 18, your aura extends to 30 feet instead of 10, which is a big boost. But like that's 5 levels of crap until you get there.
Yeah.
So what I decided to do is at that point I started taking sorcerer levels so that I could get a lot more spell slots, because you just get spell slots so much quicker. Plus subclassing into the Divine Soul Sorcerer gave me cleric spells. So I was now a paladin who can take cleric spells without having to have high wisdom. Like I was able to use charisma for all of my spells because I was a sorcerer. And that gave me the ability to cast some really cool spells, some fun heals, while also having just a lot more slots to smite than I would have otherwise, and sacrificing no damage output whatsoever. The only thing that I lost out on was, my hit die was D6 for the sorcerer levels, which is a little frustrating, but it worked really well still. Like you're tanking with your armor anyway, not your hit points. So that worked really well. I did like the fighter cleric, fighter and tempest cleric combo. That worked really well. That gave me a multi-attack. That gave me some really cool fighter abilities while also having full caster abilities. I thought that was pretty cool. I do think though the biggest thing is where are you multiclassing, right? If you're multiclassing at like level 3, you are putting yourself so far behind the rest of the party.
Right.
And it also depends on the classes, right? It's all about picking your spot. With Xander, I thought about multiclassing because I like doing it. I think it's fun, but there's just not a great spot to do that with Bard until level 20, I think. It was 19 or 20. And at that point, I was like, forget it. Like, I don't want 1 or 2 levels of Sorcerer or whatever. So, yeah, I think it's all about just kind of picking the spot. Last question. Because we're just about to our time here. Got a question from Mutt. What are some subclasses that you feel like break the mold of how their class is typically portrayed?
What was that again?
What are some subclasses that you feel like break the mold of how their class is typically portrayed?
Subclasses?
Yeah, like I think one that comes to mind for me is the Celestial Warlock. Right, you think of the Warlock. That class is typically played as like the brooding, like borderline evil person who made a deal with some sort of like horrible entity. But the Celestial Warlock, like, they're a healer, and they made a pact with a Celestial. What doesn't mean that they made a pact with something good, but that's kind of
right.
Like, you kind of look at it that way anyway. Sky Fireflies just said Oathbreaker Paladin breaks the mold as well. Yeah, for sure. The Oathbreaker Paladin is literally the exact opposite of what the Paladin is generally portrayed as.
Correct, because they're not worshiping a god; they're generating those abilities within themselves, which in a way is kind of cool to me. I'm like, I don't need you.
Yeah. Death Domain Cleric. Yep, that's another one. Can you think of any others?
Divine Sorcerer.
Yep, Divine Soul Sorcerer is definitely one right there, right? Like, the Sorcerer is usually thought of as the damage dealer, like we've talked about, but Divine Soul Sorcerer gets cleric spells. They can be a good healer or support class or something like that. Yeah, very different.
I think the new monk that they came out in Tosh is like he can heal you by punching you.
I haven't read it yet, but yeah, that would fit. I think the Arcane Archer is one as well. Like, when you say fighter, despite the fact that a fighter can be played with dex and like the player's handbook says, hey, totally make a dex-based fighter. It totally works. Most of the time, people think of the fighter as a strength-based warrior. But like the Arcane Archer is every bit as much a fighter. People just don't think of it that way. I think,
which I don't know why they don't, because if you think about medieval times, like you think about the archer lines, those guys had to have hand-eye coordination. They could wield a short sword, but they weren't like your noble knights in this full freaking suit of plate mail. So they're still fighters.
I think there's others. I think those are kind of the big ones. I think there's others though, like I don't know, like the mastermind rogue is probably a little bit different. People normally think of like the thief or assassin or something when they think rogue, but that's not that far off. I think there's others that are kind of like that aren't that far off, but are a little bit different. But I think those are kind of the big ones. With that, though, we are at our time, so that is the episode. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Those of you who are here live, thank you so much. Anyone watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, thank you guys so much for supporting us on those platforms as well. It's really fun kind of getting to do this. So yeah, go ahead and drop a like, a comment, or whatever on the YouTubes, or download on one of the podcast platforms. If you're not a part of the Discord, any one of those platforms should have a link to the Discord. Go ahead and join us there. In the meantime, I know Steve streams off and on at Stevo the DMO is his Twitch channel. I don't know if you got anything coming up this week.
We will be back Sunday, hopefully. I have not heard from any of my players if there's any life-threatening League of Legends tournaments that they have to attend. But yeah, we should be possibly finishing up that campaign that night. It's very possible.
Well, you do remember the Wine Women Adventure Tour is Sunday as well, right?
Okay.
So there's that. We've got a bonus stream on this channel on Sunday, the One Woman Adventure Tour. It's our home game, but luckily not luckily, because of COVID, we are deciding to just kind of like do it digitally, but because of that, we get to stream it. So we will be starting that at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So that will be right here. Then on Tuesday, we will be streaming. That's the first Eberron game, isn't it?
It is.
We will be starting a brand new campaign with Steve as the DM on this channel as well on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And then we'll be right back here, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, for the next episode of the Flycast on Wednesday. Also, for clarification, One Woman Adventure Tour probably won't go until like 8 o'clock or whatever it is that your game normally starts. So it's very possible there will still be a Sunday night game as Steve of the DMO if he is up for it. So that's kind of the schedule. He also streams off and on too, so you never know. Join. He's got a Discord as well that you can join to get updates there, or we normally throw the announcements in this Discord also. So once again, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. We will see you next week, or maybe on Sunday, or whatever all else. Appreciate you. Adios.
Adios.